The Rag-Picker Bodhisattva. On Gathering What the World Throws Away. By the Backyard Buddhist. There is a figure that moves quietly through history, rarely praised, almost never noticed. He doesn't build temples. He doesn't preach loudly. He doesn't gather followers. Instead, he bends. He bends toward what others have cast aside. In the narrow, soot-covered streets of Victorian London, ragpickers moved through the margins of society. They gathered what no one else wanted: discarded cloth, torn garments, scraps soaked in mud and neglect. Those fragments were cleaned, sorted, and dyed. And somehow, they became something else entirely. Warmth for the poor, utility from waste, dignity from ruin. No one celebrated the ragpickers, but without them, much would have remained lost. In another time and another place, under very different skies, Buddhist monks walked refuse grounds and roadside ditches gathering discarded cloth, funeral shrouds, rag heaps, fabric left to rot. These too were cleaned, stitched together, and dyed into robes. The Kiya, the patched garment of renunciation. And somewhere between these two worlds, the industrial grime of London and the quiet discipline of the monastery, a powerful image begins to emerge. The Bodhisattva as ragpicker, the robe of what was thrown away. Early Buddhist monastics were instructed not to seek fine garments. Instead, they were encouraged to wear what were called pasukla robes, literally, dust-heap cloth. The Buddha himself praised this practice in the Vinaya. The robe wasn't merely clothing. It was a statement. Content with robes made from cast-off rags. These robes were stitched together in patchwork form, often compared to rice fields. Irregular, humble, yet life-sustaining. What the world discarded became the very symbol of awakening. And that's not accidental. It's doctrinal. The Buddha's teaching repeatedly undermines our ideas of inherent worth and inherent worthlessness. In the light of emptiness, sunyata, nothing possesses fixed value. That which is rejected is not inherently lesser. It's only seen that way. The ragpicker monk does more than recycle cloth. He dismantles the conceptual boundary between purity and impurity. The Bodhisattva's vow toward the forgotten. Within Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva is defined not by withdrawal from the world, but by a vow to remain within it for the benefit of all beings. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. This isn't poetic exaggeration. It's a radical commitment. But if we're honest, not all beings receive equal attention. Society has hierarchies of care. Some people are uplifted. Others are ignored. Some are loved. Others are merely tolerated. And some are abandoned entirely. The Ragpicker Bodhisattva goes precisely where attention does not. Like the ragpicker walking London's alleys, the Bodhisattva walks the neglected corners of human experience. The addict nobody wants to talk to. The elderly person forgotten in a quiet room. The angry. The bitter. The broken. The person who believes they're beyond repair. The Bodhisattva doesn't flinch. He gathers. Loving the unloved. In his book The Greatest Salesman in the World, Og Mandino wrote, "I will greet this day with love in my heart. And later, I will love the unlovable." Though not written from a Buddhist perspective, the sentiment aligns remarkably well with the Bodhisattva path. It's easy to love what's lovable. It's transformative to love what seems unlovable. The Ragpicker Bodhisattva doesn't wait for beings to become worthy. He doesn't demand purification before compassion. He works with what is given, just as it is, cleaning, dyeing, and restoring. Let's stay with the metaphor for a moment. The ragpicker doesn't simply gather cloth. He cleans it. Likewise, the Bodhisattva doesn't merely save beings in some abstract sense. There is care involved. Patience. Time. This cleaning isn't moral correction. It's not about fixing people like broken machines. It's about presence. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches awareness of body, feelings, mind, and phenomena. Simple presence. And when that presence is extended toward another person, it becomes a kind of washing. Listening without judgment. Sitting without agenda. Remaining without abandoning. The Buddha said, just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life. This is the spirit of loving kindness. Compassion isn't abstract goodwill. It's intimate, embodied, and often inconvenient. After cleaning comes dyeing. Monastic robes were dyed in earthy colors. Ochre, brown, saffron. Not to beautify them in the ordinary sense, but to reduce attachment. In much the same way, the Bodhisattva helps beings re-enter the world. Not defined by their wounds. Not trapped by their stories. Not fixed, but free. The quiet work of invisible hands. The Rag-Picker Bodhisattva is not a figure of spectacle. He doesn't announce his work. Often, those he helps may never realize what has been done. This echoes a familiar Zen sentiment. When walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. No need for recognition. No need for applause. No need for spiritual trophies. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha goes even further. There are no beings to be saved. At first glance, that sounds strange. But it isn't nihilism. It's freedom from attachment. Freedom from identities, including the identity of helper or rescuer. The Ragpicker Bodhisattva doesn't think, I'm doing good. He simply bends, gathers, cleans, and moves on. Where this meets our lives. It's tempting to imagine bodhisattvas as rare and extraordinary beings, almost mythical. But this teaching presses much closer to home. Where are the rag piles in your own life? The conversation you've been avoiding. The person you've quietly written off. The part of yourself you'd rather not face. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We are not only the rag picker. We are also the rags. Each of us carries pieces we've discarded. Old grief. Old shame. Regrets. Failures. Parts of ourselves pushed into the margins of awareness. The Bodhisattva path doesn't begin somewhere out there. It begins here. With the willingness to gather what we've thrown away. To sit with it. To understand it. To allow compassion to touch it. And perhaps, over time, to transform it into something that can be worn with dignity. Walking the alleys. Imagine walking through Victorian London before sunrise. You might see the ragpickers moving quietly through the streets before the city awakens. They wouldn't look heroic. They would look tired, ordinary, unnoticed. And yet without them, something essential would be missing. The Bodhisattva walks much the same way. Not above the world. Not apart from it. But within it. Hands open. Eyes soft. Willing to gather what others leave behind. Perhaps the real question isn't whether such bodhisattvas exist. Perhaps the real question is whether, in small and quiet ways, we're willing to become one. Even now. Even here. A Backyard Buddhist reflection. I have to admit something. This article was written through tears of appreciation. Appreciation for the insight itself, and for wherever that insight emerged from. When I sit with this image of the ragpicker, I can't keep it at arm's length, because eventually it turns back on me. I begin to see that the Bodhisattva's work isn't merely out there in the world. It's right here, in the middle of our very human mess. What I've come to feel, more than think, is that the Bodhisattva isn't creating anything new. The Bodhisattva is helping things return to what they've always been. Our original nature doesn't need to be manufactured. It needs to be uncovered. And most often, that uncovering begins in the lives of people who feel broken. Not philosophically broken. Actually broken. Worn down. Hurt. Discarded by systems. Discarded by others. Sometimes discarded by themselves. The Bodhisattva doesn't stand at a distance and preach perfection. He steps into the wreckage, and he begins the quiet work of mending. Not to make someone acceptable, but to help them remember what was never truly lost. I've seen this happen in small and unremarkable ways. A conversation that lasts a little longer than planned. Sitting with someone when there's nothing to fix. Offering presents instead of solutions. And somewhere in that space, something begins to soften. Something begins to come back online. Not because we imposed anything, but because we stayed. And if I'm being completely honest, that same work has to happen inwardly. There are parts of me I've tried to discard. Old failures. Regrets. Memories I'd rather not claim. The Bodhisattva path, as I stumble along it, seems to ask that I become a ragpicker there as well. To gather those forgotten pieces. To sit with them without flinching. And to let compassion do its slow, patient work. Perhaps that's where awakening begins. Not by becoming something else, but by refusing to abandon anything.